Here are some things you should not do on your Linux install to keep your system healthy. So not all of these are things that will necessarily break your install, but just to keep your experience convenient and smooth. Up first is tinkering without a backup plan. We're tempted to try things on our Linux install since things are a lot more open to change, and that's great. But just make sure you always have a backup plan, whether that's backing up your device or really, I personally, my the most helpful thing for me was having a live CD or USB, and you can get that on Pop! OS. It's with Popsicle, but there are lots of apps for this on Linux, on Windows, on Mac for setting up a live USB. Preferably a live USB of the same OS that you're using, but does not have to be. If you're experienced, just so that if everything goes wrong, even if you can't get into headless mode, for example, you can at least chroot into your Linux install from the live USB and fix or undo whatever was done that broke your install. So that's the first major thing before anything else. Up next is running everything as root. This is now obviously most of us, even beginner Linux users, would know not to run something potentially dangerous as root. But it's not just any particular commands or giving access to malware or anything like that. It's actually it's also like a nuisance actually if you do that. So like for example, this is not something critical, but something annoying is if you were to run, like, let's say LibreOffice Writer or some application as root, right? And you create documents or files, whatever, and then go about your day. Because you created those documents as root, they have different permissions than what they were normally designed to have. So other applications may not be able to open them and such. And now, like, once you've done that, and then you go about your day, it's very hard to remember, like, oh, that's why this app is not happy with this such and such file or such and such directory. So doing everything as root, it's not just about those dangerous commands and stuff like that. It's also about these small nuisance. That's the small nuisance that you can cause if you do that. Also, next big thing is, and I know this is to beginner Linux users, this is probably like kind of funny because you would think this is the official process, right? Like this is what you should do. One thing that it's really best to avoid is, especially on most major distros, is installing your video drivers, especially with NVIDIA. I haven't used AMD in a long time, but especially with NVIDIA, at least for my experience, installing it through their official website. So basically, like from what I remember, is, and I don't think it has changed, is you fill out your information and it gives you this like .run file, and I myself have never gotten that to work. And like even if you do, it's very likely you might have to worry about that now every time you update your not update every time you upgrade your system. So I didn't do it this way. So, but potentially, if I had upgraded from Pop! OS 22.04 to 24.04, or same thing for Ubuntu, same thing for Debian, and all that stuff, I could have run into issues with my video driver. I think if I remember correctly, this was a while ago, but I don't think that this changed. Is that to do it, you have to actually go back and remove your driver, and either put back the open source driver, or again, it's a mess. There's really no reason to do it this way. I've never had success with this, even though this is from the official website and everything. Really, the best way is follow what your distro recommends. So for System 76 has their own setup for it's very easy. for both AMD and NVIDIA. And actually, for PropOS and lots of distros now, your drivers already come packaged when you install, so that's great. So no reason to manually install the driver like this. This is a huge thing not to do on Linux. It's just going to be a huge headache, and for no reason. There's lots of other easier ways to do this. And up next is messing with partitions and not knowing, and potentially deleting something, deleting a partition that is important, especially if you're dual booting. With Windows, there's a lot of like small partitions that may not make sense, and also there's like bootloader partitions sometimes and things like that. So if you're trying to, do something related to partitions in your drives, just be careful and just be sure of what you are doing. Because this is where you open the possibility of completely, wiping or permanently damaging a partition or a drive. So, AKA one of your installs, whether it's Windows or Linux or whatever it is. This is where it opens the door to potentially, damaging something that you can't fix with a live CD. Once that partition is gone, it's gone, or once it's damaged, it's damaged. You just have to start over again. Next, this is also something not really crucial. It doesn't break anything. It's just a nuisance, kind of like what we were talking about as running everything with root. When you're getting started with Linux, you need to realize that now there's several package managers, right? So before, like when I first started using, it was mainly just apt, right? You install everything with that and such. But now there is Snapcraft and FlatHub and stuff. So I googled this just to show you guys like an example. So if you just Google, how to install Discord, right? You're going to see, several options. So what this means is this opens the door to possibly installing the same software twice. Again, it's not something that breaks anything. It's just a nuisance. So just be aware, like when you're wondering, like, oh, what are all these different options? It's just that there are different package managers. And if you're wondering, why is that the case? Why is there different package managers for the same app? You just have to realize that Linux is nowhere near as black and white as Windows or Mac. There are hundreds of distributions of Linux and so many desktop environments. So these kind of package managers came about as a means to unify this installation process. So like FlatHub, for example, apt, for example, I can't obviously use that on another distribution like an Arc-based distribution or something, but I can get a FlatHub app on there. So that's kind of why we have all of these. Again, it doesn't break anything. If you install Discord twice, so you have 2 installs of Discord, it's just a nuisance. So just be aware what you're installing with when you're trying to install something, just to avoid installing it twice. And lastly, this kind of something easy but often ignored. Try not to ignore updating and upgrading for too long. It's important just to keep everything up to date and keep your machine running smoothly. And don't worry about if you're wondering, well, if I upgrade, will that mess with anything? No, it won't. Especially with if you've done everything that your distro recommends. If you've installed all the important stuff like your distro recommends, don't worry about updating and upgrading. It's always important to stay up to date on your Linux install. And one last tip I will say for those dual booting is, especially if you dual boot for video games, like you play your video games on Windows, especially those games that are not on Linux now, that are on Windows, like Valorant, Battlefield 6, they require secure boot to be enabled. A sticking point for Linux is if you installed your Linux install and you installed your NVIDIA driver and your secure boot was originally off, or on, whichever one it was originally, and you installed your video driver, and then you go back and turn it on or off, right? You basically change your secure boot settings. That's going to mess with your Linux install. And actually, even on Pop! OS, I think in general, it's not compatible with secure boot on. So if you boot to Windows and then like, okay, let me put secure boot on for one of those video games, and then whenever you come back to Linux and like, oh, wait, this is not even like launching. That's because you need to go back and turn off secure boot. So just, in case, you guys run into that and, start panicking like, oh my God, what happened? I just went to boot to Windows and now I can't boot back to Linux. Just make sure you turned off secure boot again. So basically go back to the original state that your Linux system was installed on. So if secure boot was off, go back to secure boot being off. If secure boot was on, go back to secure boot being on. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully these tips were helpful. I know a lot of these I wish I had known when I was beginning. So hopefully these were helpful for you.